And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am thrilled, pun intended, to be hosting the incredible debut author and real-life racial and social justice advocate / law professor, Lara Bazelon, here to dish about her brand new book, A Good Mother. Lara, welcome. Tell us about your book.
Sara, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to talk to you. And let's see a little bit about the book. I think it's for people who like thrills and chills and twists and turns and really just want to read all the way to the end to find out what happens.
Ooh, thrills and chills and twists and turns. You're singing my love song, lady. So I can't wait to get into every tasty aspect of all of those things. But first, I just want to welcome everyone who is watching on Facebook and YouTube. If you've been here before, you know how this works. And if you're new, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Here's how it works. So today I am giving you access to this author to ask her anything you want about this book, about her writing process, about her journey to publication, the cover, the title, what her writerly days look like, whatever questions you have going on in your mind, get them going in the comments and I will get them right over to Lara. So Lara, in real life, you are a racial and social justice advocate, and this is your first book. What was the process of writing it like? How long did it take you? Let's start there.
I think it was an elephantine gestation. So
okay, excellent. Tell us.
It depends on how far back you want to rewind the clock, Sara. But if we want to rewind it to the precursor to this book, which is its stillborn sibling, then we can rewind all the way back to 2007. If you want to rewind to just this book, we can rewind back to 2016.
Okay, perfect. Let's rewind all the way back to when you first had the idea to write a book and then you wrote one.
Okay, so I did have this idea when I was actually a federal public defender, which is what this protagonist is, to write a book with a protagonist who was a federal public defender. And so I wrote that book. It was very long. It took me a very long time. And it got me an agent, but we couldn't sell it. And it was extremely heartbreaking. And actually, what I want to say to any of your fans out there who are writers or aspiring writers, sometimes you just have to keep going in spite of really crushing disappointment like that.
Excellent. Okay. Let's back up a tiny bit more. Okay. First of all, for those of us who don't know, myself included, what is a federal public
defender?
Yeah, what does that mean and how is it different than just a regular public defender, a DA?
I love these questions. Okay, so as Law and Order tells you, actually they don't. They tell you that the people are represented by two separately yet equally important groups, the police and the prosecutors, right? So they're on one side.
Where's that noise? Dun, dun,
dun, dun, dun, yes.
Dun,
dun. On the other side are the public defenders. And so they come in different kinds of groups. So oh, shit.
Oh, is everything okay?
Sorry, I just got off for a second. So they come in two distinct flavors. Sorry about that. So flavor one is like regular old run-of-the-mill state crimes, like just typically what you would think of kind of like street crimes. And then there are federal crimes. And federal crimes are actually really weird and totally run the gamut. So I'll just give you a taste of what a federal crime is. Anything involving the post office, federal crime. So like say grandma sends you $20 in the mail and postal worker steals $20, federal crime. On the other hand, there's really, really serious stuff that's federal crimes, like killing a police officer, transporting somebody over state lines for human trafficking, bank robbery, because banks are federally insured. So when it's a federal crime, for whatever reason, you need a federal public defender. And so that's the kind of stuff that they do. And this ended up being a federal case because the defendant's husband was in the military and the crime occurred on a military base.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Wait, why did you want to be a federal defender instead of the regular run-of-the-mill Law and Order kind?
Okay, so My path to being a public defender is this. So people, and actually I just want to back up for a second and say a lot of people have this idea that actually like you're a public defender if you can't get a different kind of job. In fact, my clients would always be like, well, that was a really great result. Now maybe you can go get a real job. They figured if I was doing something for free, it must be because I couldn't possibly find anything else to do. Actually, that's not true. These jobs are super, super competitive and hard to get. So what ended up happening was that I worked for a judge who was incredibly supportive of me and of my ambitions. And he was very, very instrumental in getting me to where I ended up, which was at the Federal Public Defender's Office. And I think without his intervention, I wouldn't have gotten a job anywhere, being a public defender, doing anything.
Wow, fascinating. Okay, cool. Thank you for explaining that because I for one did not know. Okay, Margaret from YouTube is saying it is a Pavlovian reaction to that dun
Yes.
dun dun dun
Totally.
dun sound effect. I mean, I love Law and Order. Who can relate? Margaret's also saying that also Sam Waterston. Oh my God, I love Sam Waterston.
Can I say one thing to that too? So
Yeah.
okay, this is like a guilty pleasure, Margaret, but I'm right there with you, sister. I'm obsessed with Law and Order, and I feel guilty because it's all about how great prosecutors are and how guilty and terrible defendants are and how horrible and lazy and sloppy and stupid public defenders are. But I love it. And actually, my dirtiest secret is that I would come home from long days in my office being a public defender, and I would sit on my couch with $2 Chuck, and they used to make this cornbread pizza at Trader Joe's that I loved. And that's what I would do when I would watch back-to-back episodes of Law and Order.
Oh my God. So yes. So I have spent an almost, I would say embarrassingly a large amount of time, but I'm actually not embarrassed. I'm proud of this pandemic watching Law and Order. I mean, you can just spend a delicious Saturday watching back to back 8 to 10 hours of your day, just getting, into the Law and Order deliciousness. Let's dive into a little more about you. So Margaret is saying racial and social justice activist / federal public defender / motherhood. Is there anything heavy you decided not to put in here? So you're dealing with all of these big topics. Let's talk about that, Lara. So why these topics? Why this book?
Well, I think, first of all, I feel like women are not well represented in literature and film when it comes to criminal justice. And I mean that in all different ways. Generally, when you think about sort of a famous person who's been accused, you think of a man. And generally, when you think of a famous person who's a really excellent, savvy, successful lawyer, you also think of a man. And actually, many, many people who are accused are women and are mothers. And many women who are amazing trial attorneys are women and are mothers. And so I thought, okay, there's not really anything like that out there that's showcasing reality. And it might be fun to just highlight what's really amazing about, one of the very amazing things about women, which is that they do all these things in a really kick-ass way.
Oh, I love that. Okay, very cool. And a follow-up comment from Margaret saying that's got to be hard when both public perceptions of your professions, Law and Order, and from the defendants themselves is negative. Yeah, tell us a little more about that. You're just getting it from both angles.
Yeah, it's funny. I think finally in this sort of moment that we're in, public defenders, I say they're having a moment. I say that they're suddenly sexy because Joe Biden, for example, at a debate said, I wasn't a prosecutor, I was a public defender. It was kind of a selling point, which it never, ever, ever, ever is. And his administration is actually trying to put public defenders on the bench to become judges, which never, ever, ever happens. And part of that is because we're having this kind of racial reckoning in this country and this understanding about how messed up the criminal justice system is, how it over incarcerates and over punishes, and how it's really racist. And so all of a sudden, public defenders are the ones on the front lines doing the righteous job instead of the slobs defending the guilty scumbags. So it's been a really interesting reversal, but that was not true when I had my job. When I had my job, we were the redheaded stepchildren of the system. Everybody hated us. Not always our clients, but sometimes our clients were somewhat suspicious. And certainly everyone else thought we were just not great people. And so it was interesting.
So when people, when we hear the Miranda rights, if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to them, one will be appointed to you. You would be that person.
That's me.
That's you. Okay, cool. Excellent. Okay, got it. So when you, so you're taking on this and I just want to say, everybody, I have to share. So Lara has just worked to free a man who was wrongfully convicted after 34 years of his life spent in prison for a crime he did not commit. So this is very, very serious, very real, very heavy work. So thank you for that wonderful work and the way that you serve our world and the goodness that you're beaming into it and the change that you are making. So first, I want to honor that, Lara, because it's amazing. I mean, I don't know how you don't let it break your heart every day or just want to give up and stay home drinking wine and watching Law and Order. So thank you for that. In the book, so a 19-year-old woman, Luz, is on a armed forces station in Germany, and her husband, who is serving, comes home drunk, and things escalate from there, and she kills him. And this is not disputed that she did it. What we have to talk about is why, and if it was justified, if it was self-defense, and all of those things. You chose to make your heroine, well, one of them, because they've also got Abby, but you chose to make Luz Latina. Let's talk about that choice. Why, and how was that for you to write a Latina woman?
Right. So I chose to make her a woman of color because vastly disproportionate in the system are women of color getting charged. And so I thought it was really, really important to be real about who's caught up in the system. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, it's overwhelmingly people of color, and that's true whether they're women or men. I made the choice to not write that character either in the first person or in what's called the close third person, where you're inside of their head giving the reader the person's thoughts. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One, I felt like it would be weird and appropriative as a white woman to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't. And then two, because I actually didn't know how to do that without giving away too much of the plot. And I felt like a big part of it had to be that you were always wondering what was going on in her head and what her motives were.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. And then, so we have Luz, the 19-year-old defendant, who Abby, the first pregnant and then new mom, federal public defender, because it did take place internationally, but Luz was last living, Luz and her deceased husband were last living in California before they went over to Germany. So this happens, they extradite her back to California, and it's tried in a federal, and the judge gets offended. It's not, he said, this is a federal courthouse. The state courthouse is across the road, across the street. And so then we have two very different mothers. And of course, the name of the book is A Good Mother. So we have Luz, the 19-year-old mother on the stand, not on the stand, but facing these criminal charges of murder. And then we have Abby defending her. What do you want to get across? What from when people read this book and they leave, what do you want them to really be pondering? Is it what makes a good mother? Is that the heart of what this is?
I really do want people to walk away asking themselves that question. And that's in part because I think that the word mother is such a charged word. I even think it's the most charged word maybe in the English language. And we have such fixed ideas about what it means to be one. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to center two different mothers as kind of co-protagonists who have strengths and also very, very deep flaws, and have the reader ask him or herself, did they do the best they could for their children? Did they do the best they could for their lives? And in Abby's case, did she do the best that she could for her client?
And are those things creating tensions between the two? Can you ever fully do that? Can you be a great litigator and also still a great mother? And does something have to give when you're able to be fully present in that other role?
Exactly. And of course, as your readers will come to find out, a lot does give here, because it's not really possible, particularly in situations like the ones that these characters find themselves in, to do all things in an excellent way, or even in a very decent way.
I love that. Margaret saying great points about this moment, just looking up from the defense table to the bench, the importance of public defenders as judges from the Alliance for Justice, which I actually didn't even know that was a thing. So thank you, Lara, and thank you, Margaret. That is really great. And why? So both of these women, as you say, have very deep flaws. Anissa's giving us hearts up. Thank you so much, Anissa. Both of these mothers, these women, have very deep flaws. Very different, very deep flaws. Why did you choose their flaws? and how? Like, why does Abby have her flaw, and why that flaw, and lose as well?
Well, I think going to lose first, if she didn't have the flaws that she did, she wouldn't have found herself probably making the decisions that she was making. And so she's someone who grew up with a lot of adversity and had fairly limited choices, and then acted within the constriction of those choices. But I think maybe a different kind of person would have done things differently. So she kind of had to have those flaws to be the kind of client that she is. And then kind of the same thing with Abby, because you have to be, I think, somewhat of a zealot to leave your maternity leave days into it so that you can come back and try this case when no one's actually asking you to do that. And in fact, people are telling you not to do that. And you have to be a certain kind of person and a certain kind of mom to make that decision, which is a pretty controversial decision.
Exactly. And something that I learned several years ago was that actually a very small percentage of cases actually get tried at all. Most of them end up settling. And so I understood Abby's desire to want to get the chance to be in front of the bench, to fight this, to argue this case. And I think she was it seemed like she was so fascinated by the challenge of creating this defense and how she very strategically, very artfully, lined everything up to do that. Even just what she wore, her choice to wear high heels, even though as a 9-month pregnant person, that was a tough choice, when she's tipping forward, or she's tottering and about to fall, or, leaving her maternity leave early, or, sort of cupping her bump, as to gain sympathy points. We all know someone like that. Let's be honest. There were so many little moments. Well, Shauna, I love that scene in the beginning of the book where Shauna, the prosecutor, is rolling her eyes like, give me a freaking break. But then she also holds the elevator for her. I loved that moment because it was that moment between these two very different women where it's like, give me a break, but I'm still going to help you because you're a woman. It was such a multi-layered conversation that was conveyed from a craft perspective very efficiently, just in these few little lines.
Thank you for saying that. I know it is tricky, these relationships that women have with each other. I think in particular in a professional setting where on the one hand, those two are set up to be adversaries, but on the other hand, there's ways in which I think they can both relate to the other one. Although there is a scene where Abby's attempt to do that totally backfires.
Margaret saying mother may be the most charged word in history, not an understatement. Yes. And I think another thing, Margaret, I totally agree. And thank you. Another thing I noticed which I thought your book addressed really well, is both the reverence and the pressures that we put on mothers, and yet the complete lack of structure and support that we have to help them. So, here's Abby trying to do her work as a defense attorney, but she doesn't have there's no childcare for her. She's trying to manage all of this. Like, there's no support for her, but then we're expecting her to do this. And it seems like it's something that every single friend of mine who is a mom struggles to do.
Absolutely. I've actually been researching this issue a lot, and it's crazy to me that it's 2021 and we have so little support for women. And that plays itself out in the book too, because she and her partner can't afford to hire a nanny. The baby's too young for daycare. Her mom is kind of absent, and they don't really have any family. So they're like a lot of families, in that they're just basically stuck with just patching together whatever they can, which is in this case, her partner having to take a lot of time off of work, which he did not want to do. And I think a lot of families find themselves in that situation. We don't subsidize daycare. We have really bad options for a lot of women, or no options. And so it just leaves them feeling really stuck. And it's wrong and it's embarrassing. And I'm actually hoping that this COVID relief bill, which puts some structures in place for a limited amount of time for working women, that will be extended when people realize how helpful it is.
As someone who literally has walked in these high heels, who literally has walked in Abby's shoes, and in the work that you do, with racial and social justice, do you feel that it's harder for you as a woman than it would be for a man to get in there and fight to free these wrongly incarcerated people?
Yes. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think it is, because there's just all kinds of assumptions about my level of competence or lack thereof, and whether I can be taken seriously or not. And even though it's been almost 20 years, I still experience that all the time.
Wow. So even with the fact that you are so successful at it. I heard you say the other day, a lot of people do this work in terms of trying to free people, but not everyone is successful in doing it. You are. It's incredibly hard. And yet, even in spite of that success, it's still hard. Like, you haven't gained any street cred. They're not like, everybody look out, here comes Lara.
No, they're not. It's funny too. I mean, I always thought eventually it would change and I would build up enough political capital, but I think it's a combination of just basic stereotypes about women and their competence, and also the fact that I've moved around a fair amount. And so once I built up a reputation in LA, I promptly left, and then I had to build up another one in San Francisco. And then my most recent case was in Louisiana, where nobody knew who I was. And so every time you're starting all over again. And when that happens, people are just looking at you and seeing basically, unfortunately, a gender stereotype.
And were the people in Louisiana like, who's this highfalutin California blonde coming into our courthouse and telling us we did things wrong? I mean, what was that like?
That case, so that was my most recent exoneration case. My client was exonerated on March the 18th, 2021. His name is Utica Briley Jr. And yes, it was crazy litigating there. I had never been to Louisiana before I had Utica's case. I'd never actually been there ever in my life. I don't have a bar card in Louisiana State Court. I had to get special permission to appear. I had certainly never been any place like that. The justice system makes the California justice system look functional, and that's saying something, because it's not. And yes, there was a lot of suspicion about me, about my law students, these fancy people coming in from San Francisco trying to tell them what to do. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that must have been very interesting and very multi-layered and very challenging. I was just watching the OJ documentary, and which was fascinating. And at one point, his defense team has to fly to, I think it's North Carolina. Yes, North Carolina. And they, Bob Shapiro first tries to petition the court to get the records that they need, and it's denied because they don't like these people coming in from California. And so then, then they have to think about, okay, who can go in there and be more of a man of the people and not get them, so defensive. So this is, this is really cool. Lara, what are you working on next? What do you want to write next?
So I'm finishing up a nonfiction book that's called Ambitious Like a Mother.
Ooh.
And it's about ambitious women who are moms and the career choices that they make. And the argument is that they're actually better mothers, not worse ones, even though everybody makes them feel guilty and terrible all the time. And I'm writing another novel, which I'm excited about. I'm very early on in the process. It's super embryonic, and I don't exactly know where it's going to go, which is kind of the scary, but also the exciting part.
Yay. Dog cameo. Yes, we're all here for the dog cameos. Tell us about your fluffy friend.
Okay. So you asked, this is Kittle. He was barking because he felt like it was his interview and he doesn't understand why he wasn't front and center. He is
hi, baby.
Our puppy. We didn't actually have a dog until the pandemic. And then, because I was anti the whole idea, because I worked too much, et cetera, all the reasons I gave my kids, but they broke my will. And I'm really glad that they did, because he's a huge part of our family now.
Oh, yes, exactly. There is nothing like the love of a dog, and he is extremely cute. Yes, please keep him in there. We really need to see his sweet little face.
He's licking the foundation off my face. So if I change color, that's why.
We have to ask him, wait, is his name Kibble?
His name is Kittle, like little, but with a K. He's named after a San Francisco 49ers football player.
Let's ask Kittle what he thinks about A Good Mother, and if he, about his vital role as the assistant editor / emotional support animal of the author.
Okay, hold on. Let me find out. Okay. Well, he said it was definitely challenging on his end, which is why he demanded extra bones, and he's glad that he got them, because trying to deal with a writer, he said, is really exhausting. They're drama queens, they expect a lot, and sometimes they're just gloomy and in a dark place. So as a dog, it was his responsibility to lift this writer out of that place, and he's really glad for a reprieve.
Yes.
That's what he said. I mean, he speaks really fast, but that's the gist.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, because we all want to hear from Kittle. Margaret's saying, on the pressure to work in a certain mode to counter the gender stereotype, do you do anything to prevent that creeping into your own self-image, work versus private lives? Ooh, Margaret, great question. Thank you.
That is a good question. It's funny. So when I started my current job, which was in 2017 at the University of San Francisco as a full-time law professor on a tenure track, I was assigned a tenure advisor, and that's someone who's supposed to, just help you through the process because getting tenure is hard. And the advice from that person was, do not talk about your kids, don't have pictures of your kids, don't ever allude to the fact that you have this competing responsibility because that's going to be seen as a negative. And if there's a reason why you can't make a function or present a paper or do something that you're supposed to do, never say that it's because of your kids. Women like that don't get tenure. And I was like, well, that's going to require a fair amount of dishonesty on my part. And I felt like I wasn't really willing to do that, to sort of pretend that I wasn't a single mom and that I didn't have a lot going on.
Right.
And not have my kids' pictures in my office. That seemed a little extreme. So I just kind of tacked in the opposite direction and was really honest about times when I had conflicts. I was honest about it with my law students. I was honest about it with my dean. And I just don't really feel like I lost anything by that. I think that, we're coming to a point where sometimes there is strength in being vulnerable.
Ooh, I love that. There is strength in being vulnerable. Exactly. And really, I mean, if we look at the roots of that ask of you, it's rooted in the male patriarchy, right? Because they're saying, don't talk about your kids because because you're up against men who have presumably women at home taking care of those kids. So they don't want you to be any different than these male archetypes, these patriarchal archetypes of someone who doesn't have to worry about kids because they have the privilege and the luxury of having a full-time parent at home. And so it's making women or whoever might be working without that support conform to these really ancient, really sexist, roles.
Yes. And I think the other problem with that is you're setting a bad example for the women coming up behind you. And in the sense that if you make it look effortless at a great cost to yourself and sort of pretend that everything's easy and that you don't have conflicts between childcare and work and you don't have all these other things going on behind the scenes, and you mask that and make it seem as if you have everything perfectly under control, you're setting a terrible example. And I think it's really important for the women who are coming up after me in academia, in trial advocacy and whatever, to understand that it's just a hot mess, and that's okay. It's okay for it to be a hot mess. That's normal, because if people won't see the normal part, then they think it's not going to be possible for them.
Exactly. And in that algorithm of truth, of revelation, of authenticity carries it over to everywhere, right? So if I asked you about your book and I said, Lara, how long did it take you to write this? And you said, a month. This little thing. I did it in my spare time, just a month or two. That's not fair to me or to anyone who's watching, because then we think, oh my God, what's wrong with me that I can't do that? Whereas if you share, no, these are the trial and tribulations, these are the struggles, and this is how long it took me. It's like, oh my God, me too. There's such a relief, and there's such a camaraderie, and there's such a support in that. So
I completely agree. And I think it's really important to know that there's a whole sisterhood out there of people who are having the exact same struggles, right? And this idea that you have to make it look effortless and like you have no flaws seems so misguided to me, as does the idea, I think, that some people have, like, oh, well, there's one woman seat at the table, so I've got to go get that seat and nobody else can sit there, right? It's the idea that, like, no, we need more chairs, we need more spaces at the table. But when you're helping someone else, you're not giving anything up. It's not a zero-sum game.
Exactly. I love that. Lara, your book was named oops, I just dropped that book. It was named a Library Journal Best Debut Novel of the spring and summer. Congratulations. Were you shocked by this news, or were you kind of like, no, I knew, I knew this book was great. Give us a peek.
I was shocked. And again, this is kind of a story, I think, that's just important to tell, which is I wrote another book that was nonfiction in 2018. That was my first book. This is my second. This is my first novel. And that book got almost no attention at all. And it was deeply disappointing to me. It got no reviews by anyone, as far as I know. It just sort of dropped like a stone. And so that experience was really searing. And I just sort of braced myself for the exact same thing. I was basically expecting, okay, it's not going to get a Kirkus review or a Publishers Weekly review or a Booklist review, and the library journal is going to ignore it. I just was braced for that. And so every time anybody has paid attention to it, it's been a pleasant surprise. And I don't say that because I don't think it's a good book. I do. I say that because my past experience led me to believe that that's how it would end up.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Margaret saying just saw the legs off some of the men's chairs. Just saying, absolutely. Because I think the other thing too is that when there's this sense of, that you're talking about, that there's only one seat at the table for a woman, so I've got to be that woman. That sense of faux scarcity also fuels the sense of necessary competition between women, and that is false, and creates this idea that we have to be competing against each other instead of instead of supporting each other. Donna's saying she's coming in late, need to watch the beginning later. Donna, you're right on time. This will stay up on YouTube, on Facebook, everywhere, so you can totally go back and watch it to see what you missed. But let us know if you have any questions for Lara in the meantime. Lara, I also want to talk about Alifair Burke said this is a high stakes legal thriller packed with intense courtroom drama. Yum. What do you think the secret is to creating that high stakes sense, to creating that drama, that high stakes, that, oh my God, this is so freaking pivotal and intense.
I think the key is that you've got to go to extremes, even if you're really, really pushing the envelope in terms of what people would actually say or do. And there's a couple of places where I do completely push the envelope, and people have rightly said that would never happen in a courtroom, which a couple of times.
That's a reenactment.
Yeah.
Because that is on my list of questions to you, because I've never seen a reenactment and I want to know.
Okay, so I'll tell you about the reenactment. Yes, so there's a scene in the book where Abby's trial partner, this guy Will, reenacts the death scene using Luz and using himself as her husband. And they basically just like acted out in front of the jury. And a lot of readers have said, that's so crazy, that would never happen. Actually, it did happen in real life, and it inspired me because Luz's case is inspired by an actual case that was tried by two of my colleagues in the early 2000s. And one of them, the male lawyer on the team, made the decision to have her walk through the last 5 minutes of her husband's life and what that life or death struggle was like for them in the hallway. And, I took some creative liberties, let's say. I mean, my colleague did not take off his shirt and nobody got hit, but he played the whole thing out with her, and it was riveting. I had never seen anybody do that before. It was absolutely riveting. And I thought it was very, very effective. And so that's a good example of sort of taking something that happened in real life, but it was, obviously we were in federal court. There were certain rules that he had to abide by, and kind of throwing out some of the rules so that I could be more dramatic about it.
Well, it was interesting because, again, that was on my list of questions because I had never seen a reenactment. So, again, if you haven't read the book yet, that's totally okay. So, again, this woman, 19-year-old Luz, stands accused of, well, I mean, she doesn't stand accused. She did it. She killed this man, this husband of hers. But the question is she going to go to prison for the rest of her life, or is she going to get off for, self-defense or whatever the other options might be, manslaughter, one, a lesser sentence, whatever. And actually they offer that to her, a 10-year sentence. And she says, no, I've got to be there for my baby. But anyway, and so the lawyer Will, says, we've got to show them how she was in fear of her life. She was terrified. This 200-pound, big military dude is, wiling out and attacking her. And she's a little tiny, 100-pound, not nothing, but a little person, a slender, small person. And so we've got to bring her into that moment where any of us would be like, oh my God, fight for your life, Luz, fight for your life. And so they reenact the murder, graphically so. I mean, she is hitting him. And I thought to myself, would that ever happen? But then I thought, Lara Bazelon is a real life litigator. She is a law professor. So if it's in there, I'm going to trust it.
I think, he was actually my supervisor at the time. I thought he did a really masterful job of going right up against the line of what the judge was going to allow when he did that in reenactment with his client. And like I said, it was fun to fictionalize it because it's both true that you can do it and not true that you can do it exactly in the way that it was in the book.
Laura, I got to know, how did that case get decided in real life?
That case was so interesting. So actually there's a plot twist in my book where Will wants
don't give away too much.
I will. But where Will wants the jury to be faced with this all or nothing decision. He wants all their choices taken away and just to have them be faced with first-degree murder or nothing, rather than having them pick from this menu where it's like, okay, maybe not first degree, but second degree, or maybe not second degree, but voluntary, or maybe not voluntary, but involuntary. There's this, normally you would give them the whole option and then they can pick the level of culpability. And his strategy is no, make them go all or nothing. And the actual case, it was the opposite, where the defense lawyer said, no, we want all these different options. And the prosecution was like, no. You could only pick these two. And so the jury was not instructed on the least culpable charge, which is negligent homicide. And she was convicted. She was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, and then the Court of Appeals reversed and said it was error not to give that instruction. And then she was tried again. I know. Then they did another trial. Then what happened? And somehow I'm trying to remember what happened after the end of that trial. But in the end of the day, she ended up taking some kind of a plea to time served rather than serve. I think she got 8 years, and she was just decided that she was going to take a deal and get out immediately and be with her daughter.
What was she found guilty of?
She was, I think, so what did they do? They hung on second degree, and she went down on a voluntary, and then they tried it again. And I think she went down again on a voluntary, and then there was another problem. So they're going to have to try it again. And the government just said, you know what? You don't have to serve your sentence. Like, we'll keep our conviction. You can get out. And she was like, great.
But after 8 years served.
So she ended up doing maybe less than 2.
Wow. Oh my God. Okay. This is intense. Does Lara, do you have defense attorney writer friends to talk over writing issues with? Is there a very niche network for this combo? Is anyone saying to you, this would not happen? And you're saying, yes, it would. Do you have a writer group? Tell us.
I was so lucky when I was writing the first incarnation of this book, because I was part of this incredible writers group in LA. And it was amazing. I was the redheaded stepchild in this group. It was people who were just incredible. Raina Grand and Jessica Garrison and Marsh, Sonia Nazario, and Tony Ann Johnson. And they were all published writers. None of them, though, were lawyers. And we would meet about once a month, and we would read each other's work. And they were absolutely instrumental in, first of all, making me believe I was a real writer, but also, second of all, giving me some really important edits and pointers. But they didn't. I thought it was actually helpful that they weren't lawyers, to be honest, because the problem with other lawyers is we all think that all of it's interesting. And as my older sister pointed out, most of it's really boring. And so, which is what some of my writer group friends would tell me. They would basically say, you need to just get rid of these 5 pages because nobody really cares about this intricacy of the law that you're so fascinated with. And so I think it's helpful to have really good writers read your work, but not necessarily do your job.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. Lara spills the tea. It is not interesting. That's hilarious.
Some of my job is really boring to other people. I personally find it fascinating, but if I say the words habeas corpus to you and then want to have a talk, Sarah, you probably wouldn't want to have a talk with me. And I totally get that.
I actually would, because my next book is a true crime and habeas corpus is pled. So I'm going to need, and I had to look up what that meant, Lara. So I actually do know what it means, but I had to look it up because I need a legal thriller writing buddy. And guess what? It's going to be you.
Awesome. I'm totally honored. Ask me anything about habeas. I'm happy to talk.
Perfect. Donna chiming in from Facebook saying, you're making this book sound very exciting. Definitely a book I got to look into. I love legal drama. Donna, it's exciting. Hold on to your hat. Maybe put a seatbelt on your rocking chair, because I love rocking chairs. You're going to need it, lady. You're going to need it. So the praise for this book is crazy. Angie Kim raves. Lara Bazelon combines a riveting courtroom drama with a nuanced and thought-provoking examination of gender, race, and justice. Helmed. You don't hear that word every day. I love it. Helmed by an intelligent, complex, and flawed protagonist. A Good Mother is beautifully written. A beautifully written debut that kept me turning the pages late into the night. Incredible praise there from the amazing Angie Kim, author of Miracle Creek. So the praise for this as a legal thriller and as high courtroom drama just pouring in. Kathy, another one of my other favorite reviews, comes this one from Kathy Hanauer, who's the New York Times author of Gone, The Bitch in the House, and The Bitch is Back. Anyone fans of that book, let me know in the comments. She also gave you a rave review, or I should say you earned a rave review. I don't like when people say gave. No, this was earned. This praise was earned. She says that this is sexy, shrewd, and wholly contemporary, because this is very sexy. There's some graphic there. Well, not graphic. I'm going to take that back. There are some ooh la la sexy scenes in there. And she said this is takes a pitch perfect characters, a page whipping plot, and 3 themes about marriage, lust, betrayal, and juggling of motherhood. What do you think is the key to the page whipping plot? What keeps us whipping those pages? What keeps Angie Kim up till late in the night, Lara?
I think maybe this is the crucial difference between this book and the novel with the same people that I was not able to sell, which is that I would ask myself this question: is the seed advancing the plot? And if the answer was no, I cut it. And so this book is about 100 pages shorter than the first novel that I wrote that I couldn't sell. And I think it's because it's so plot driven. It's just, is this advancing the plot? Is this advancing the plot? And if the answer is no, then you're slowing it down. And then you're going to lose people who really want a specific kind of genre, right? They want this heart-stopping roller coaster ride. They don't want to just stop on the roller coaster and look around at the scenery. That's a different kind of book. So you just have to go, go, go. And I think that was the hard lesson that I learned between 1 and 2. Okay,
cool. Very, very, yeah, because that I'm still learning that lesson. That's not the lesson for me. I'm like, did you understand? But did you really understand? But are you sure you understood? And meanwhile, the readers are probably like, we got it the first time, Sarah, back off. Margaret saying, oh my God, 100 pages slicing and dicing over there. So yeah, that is a lot. What was it? So how many pages was it at before? And
so the first one was about 400 and something. And I think this one is in the low 3s. I just had to be really ruthless. And you're right, Sarah, it's so hard, especially because you think I spent days and days writing the scene, and now I'm just going to get rid of every word. Those words came out of me one at a time. I birthed them very painfully. This is horrible to have to hit the erase button. It's so brutal. But I also just felt like I kept telling myself, do you want to sell this book or not? And I did. So I just decided that I had to really just be absolutely ruthless when I was editing.
Yes, absolutely ruthless is key, and also so hard because I am that sentimental fool who's like, farewell, old friend. It took me 3 hours to write you.
Totally.
Love you. Like I actually
sentence. And it probably was, but it's not advancing the plot. So
exactly. I actually had to create a file called Great Writing I May Need Later because it was just too painful to let go. So I was like, oh, but really I'm like, it's the trash, but then I tell myself, no, I may need it later.
I honestly think that's a really great idea. And actually, I will say that the one comfort I have about my novel that I couldn't sell is that pieces of it ended up in here. In this one. And so I was able to extract some things, not much, but enough that I felt like, okay, this was serving a purpose, was providing a backstory. And I did save things. And you're absolutely right to save things because you never know.
Oh, yay. I love that. Okay. Thank you for letting me, you know what? I actually never thought I would. I never really did think I would use it again. So thank you so much. I think we're all curious to see your absolutely brutal beast mode.
That's so funny. My client's mom called me a beast, and it was the best compliment I ever got in my life. She said that after he was exonerated. She came up to me in the courtroom and said, "You are a beast." And it was the best compliment I've ever gotten in my entire life. I will always treasure that moment.
Lara the Beast. Okay, I absolutely love it. Margaret is also an author. She specializes in English and Scottish historical fiction. She can totally relate. She's saying, great writing I may need later, a sparkly pink trash can. Okay, Margaret, now I know what to get you for your next birthday. You're getting a sparkly pink trash can. I love it. Oh, she has one last question. Did you or do you read a lot of legal thrillers? What would you say about readers' tolerance for nuance / ambiguous morality these days and previously? Oh my God, Margaret, what a great question.
So the easy answer to the first part is yes, I read a ton of legal thrillers. I think the question about what readers will tolerate in terms of ambiguousness around morality is really, I guess, out for decision. The jury is out on that. And that's not true with male protagonists because readers give male protagonists a lot of leeway, but women protagonists have to walk a finer line, just as they do in real life. And I think that the jury is really out about how much complexity and how many flaws they're willing to tolerate in a woman that is at the center of the book, or women who are at the center of the book.
Very interesting. And when I skulk about doing my late night lurking, reading the reviews of various books with complicated female characters, I'm always fascinated by what people say about that. Margaret's teasing me. She says the jury is out. Couldn't resist it. Could yet. We couldn't. We live for it. I love the double entendre. Oh, good question from Hallmark, who would like to know, do you practice law anymore, Lara?
I do. So I'm super lucky. My job is to practice law. So my job at the law school is to train law students how to be lawyers by running essentially a pro bono law firm that the law school funds. So basically what we do is we represent actual people in real cases, and that's my job. And I actually have tenure to do that job, so I can do it forever as long as I don't do something truly awful and get kicked out of the school. So it's pretty great. And I get to pick whatever case I want, which is also super cool. So I practice law all the time. And plus I have side hustles. So I do other things on the side.
Wow. Wait, this is crazy. I've never heard anything like this. I want to make sure my non-lawyer brain understands. So at the law school where you are in San Francisco, where you are a tenured professor over there, Professor Bazelon, you get to run basically a pro bono law firm. You get to run it. And then you're just scrolling through the news. You see somebody, maybe Sarah, who has committed a possibly heinous crime, which was entirely justified because that's what I would do. And then you say, you know what, let's help Sarah, or let's help Luz, or let's help any of these people. And then you get to pick that. And then you have minions of law students who are your employees who do this.
It's really crazy. So just to give you a sense of how this has played out recently, I used to be pretty careful and I would try to stick to very specific kinds of cases within certain parameters. And certainly I tried to stay in California. And then in 2019, I got an email from my older sister, who is a very prominent journalist, saying there's this case in Louisiana, and I was just wondering if you could look into it. I'm not sure this person actually did it. And my initial response was, no, it's in Louisiana. I don't practice there. The last wrongful conviction case I had was in 2013. I don't really do that anymore. And then I read about the case for about 10 minutes, and I just knew immediately that he was innocent. I just knew. And I also knew that my sister wouldn't have asked me if other people hadn't said no first. And I knew that we were it. It was us or nobody. And so I said to myself, I can take whatever case I want. That's what tenure means. I'm taking this case. And for the next 2 years, we litigated that case in Louisiana. And so that's the kind of freedom that I have with my job, which I feel super, super, super lucky to have, because we were the only people that would have taken it.
Wow. Oh my God. This is so freaking cool.
It was crazy. And it was a dead bang loser, not because he didn't do it. He was absolutely innocent, but because of how hard it was to prove. I mean, so many things had to break right for him, and they miraculously did. But for 2 years, it looked completely hopeless. Like it was never going to happen.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Hallmark speaking for all of us, saying, wow, thank you so much. This is so interesting. I totally agree. I'm just fascinated. I absolutely love this. Margaret saying, what do you have to say about the similar setup of a job in Legally Blonde then? LOL.
So I actually just wrote about Legally Blonde. Legally Blonde features not prominently, but I talk about it in my nonfiction book, in part because I feel like Reese Witherspoon is such a fascinating actress and human being in terms of the evolution of women and what it says about feminism. And it's so fascinating to me that that's her best known and most beloved role. And she's playing someone who just comes off as a complete airhead, but who's actually incredibly smart, but it's played for laughs because no one can believe that she really knows what she's doing. Right. And that's the whole kind of heart of the Legally Blonde plot. And that's why people love her, because she's utterly non-threatening. And it's interesting that in future roles, Reese Witherspoon has gone on to play some very complicated people. And she's talked about that and said, I got to this point in my career where basically it was like Babe, District Attorney, driving Miss Daisy. And I was on the Miss Daisy end of things, which is insane if you look at her. But basically she wasn't getting parts, and she was not the girl next door anymore, or the flavor of the month. And she had to start her own production company, which she did, and start producing scripts that feature the kind of characters that she wanted to play. And it is interesting to watch her evolution from, say, Elle Woods and Legally Blonde to some of the roles she's had more recently, roles that she's been instrumental in creating for herself.
Oh my gosh, totally. Yes, exactly. And when she created Hello Sunshine, which is her production company, the first movie that she did was Gone Girl, which is a complex heroine and a complex story. And nobody would give her money to do that. She had to put her own money up, like her own personal money up, a large portion to make a large portion of that budget to make that movie. And I saw her give a speech when she was awarded a Woman of the Year award. And she said, they always say never put your own money up when you're starting a company or starting a film, because you're not going to ever get it back. And you want to go with corporate financing or whatever. But she did, because ain't nobody else going to give her that money. And then look what she did. She was hugely successful. And then, has gone on to do everything from Little Fires Everywhere to an incredible array of work. And it's so fascinating to see that evolution. She is a fascinating woman. And Lara, you are a blonde. So actually you are legally blonde.
I'm a blonde in a bottle. See?
You're blonder than I am. Reese Witherspoon as a key figure representing so many changing trends in gender stereotypes and feminism. Yes, love this. Margaret, totally. What's the name of your nonfiction book?
So it's called Ambitious Like a Mother. I can't remember the subtitle because I lost the war about what the subtitle was supposed to be with the publisher. And so it's not my subtitle, but I think anyone only remembers the actual title, right? How often do you remember what comes after the colon in a nonfiction?
Well, I have an elephantine good memory. I mean, ask my husband. I'm literally like, in 2013, on January 12th, you said something that I'm still mad about. But I do, but I'm a freak. So I think most people just remember the title. Margaret, you're totally right. Lara is one of those people doing so many admirable things, like Alex George, who of course is the founder of the Unbound Book Festival and has his own bookshop in Columbia, South Carolina, called Skylark Bookshop, and is a best-selling author of most recently The Paris Hours. I love him, and he has a British accent, so there's just bonus points. So yes, Lara and Alex George doing fascinating, fabulous things. Oh my gosh, I just realized we are way over our time because I'm gabbing away, having a good time, just chatting away about all the things. Lara, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Oh, Margaret's letting me know Alex George practices law too. My God, when does that guy sleep?
I know, right?
God, when do you sleep? You're exonerating people, writing thrillers, mothering, dog momming. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining us here. This interview will live on. Donna saying this was fun. Thank you, Donna. Thanks for joining us. So good to have you. This interview will live on Facebook and YouTube forever, so everyone can rewatch it. And I will see you next Tuesday, where I'll give you 2 more fabulous featured authors. Stay tuned, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you so much for hosting me. I loved being in conversation with you. You're the best. Thank you.
Yay.